Good afternoon, LinkedIn. Welcome to Let's Build Daily. I'm your host, Chris Carolan. Super special guest today, Stuart Balcombe. How you doing, man?
Good. Thank you so much for having me on. This is fun.
Yeah, I've been following you for a long time. Appreciate all the workflow stuff. So thought we might be able to build some stuff out today. Post sales is super dear to my heart. And I know you care a lot about that. But before we get into that, if there happens to be people out there watching that don't know who you are, who are you?
Yeah, so I'm Stuart Balcombe. I until pretty recently ran growth at a HubSpot app partner, Arrows, and sort of got I don't know if indoctrinated is the right word, but pretty deep in the HubSpot ecosystem through that experience. Arrows is a collaborative onboarding tool built sort of specifically for HubSpot now, and as part of that, spent a lot of time helping folks who trying to figure out how to build, how to implement, how to manage post-sale relationships with customers in HubSpot, how to do that. So I created sort of steal this workflow on LinkedIn, which as Chris mentioned, lots of workflows, lots of all sorts of sort of specific use case implementations in HubSpot. So shared over time on LinkedIn, and I think that that's ultimately my experience is all early stage sort of growth and product, and HubSpot is a really interesting place to be connecting all those pieces, as I'm sure we'll talk about today, in one place and enabling the teams that are working with customers.
Yes, we are talking about that today. Enabling those customer teams specifically, on that journey. And maybe you'll get into that with this question, but like now you've got some freedom, let's say, to talk about what you want to talk about and focus on the topic, whatever you want. And you've chosen Connected GTM. Why?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that was sort of, I think we picked up on pretty early at Arrows. It's something that HubSpot, to my knowledge, first mentioned at Inbound 2022. Was the idea of the connected platform, the connected customer journey, which isn't exactly a new concept from a outside of CRM, outside of tech perspective, but I think it sort of encapsulates a lot of things that are going on in the world of business today, right? That the role of retention, the role of post-sale revenue, and being efficient with the the dollars that you've spent on acquiring a customer means more investment, more importance in retaining and ultimately expanding those customers. And the best way to do that is to build a journey, build an experience for both the customer and for the team that acknowledges that it's not transactional. It's not a, we sold you this one time, figure it out type situation, but actually everything when it comes to being successful from a business perspective, but also helping your customers be successful, comes back to how do we best align the whole reason that you were buying this thing in the first place with the impact and the result that you actually get out of it. As a result of making this purchase, making this investment, what can you now go do? And how does that make your business better, your life better? And that, connecting all these things in a tool like HubSpot gives you a lot of advantages when it comes to actually delivering that experience in practice.
Right. And like so many teams out there, especially the ones I was on inside, it's like there's always like resell, upsell, cross-sell goals. And then somehow there's not a system in place, to support that. So you have people either not incentivized to do that and they're just looking for new business, or you have post-sale systems where you can't see, any of the data you need to see to be able to have these conversations that are focused on success. So what has changed? So if HubSpot starts talking about it in 2022, the concept itself is not new. What do you think has changed in HubSpot, for us to be able to start talking about this, like in actually implementing these systems in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few things. I think HubSpot has certainly been making more of a push to be a customer platform, right? That the real value of HubSpot, there's obviously the specific point in the journey, specific use case sort of focused hubs, but the real value of HubSpot is having the data, having the teams, having the context about the entirety of the customer journey in one place, right? And the more data that you're able to pull into one place, the more effectively you can leverage it across the journey. And I think that until pretty recently, until Spotlight this year, where HubSpot announced the customer success workspace, which was really their first, we are actively investing in proactive post-sale process. It had Service Hub for a little while, which has been pretty exclusively focused on support and sort of reactive use cases historically. With the customer success workspace, and there's more coming there with health scoring and other things that are sort of more that you might have historically seen only in sort of customer success platforms. I think that investment really sort of closed the loop, or that sort of public shipping customer success functionality sort of really closes the loop on, well, actually, this is the place. It's sort of been true for a while that if you bring all your data here, it's more efficient, more effective to run a connected motion in HubSpot. But unless you're really deep in the weeds, you're not necessarily connecting all the dots until there's something that is called the use case that you're trying to achieve, right? And I think that that's ultimately what we're seeing with some of, I'm sure we'll continue to see it with some of the AI features in HubSpot. But the more that you're able to bring your process into HubSpot, the more the value compounds with sort of each additional use case that you're unlocking, right? Or every time you're trying to bring in a new team, or you're trying to run a new process, you're going to have the data in the same tool that you need to go ultimately, create that connected experience, but just move much faster, because your time on value add activities is going to be much higher, as opposed to, well, now we have to go integrate this thing, or we have to set up this other third party thing. Because everything's sort of built on top of the connected layer, which is HubSpot.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, because that's really where, like, it does compound very quickly. We're very close to the, world of true 360-degree view of a human being on one contact record, with the pace of updates they're making related to, associated property cards that just came out this week.
Yep.
Really changes the game. And then we are seeing engineering teams move into HubSpot to help with quoting, accounting teams, at least pay attention to HubSpot. And so if you're out there thinking like who should be connected, it should, for me, it should be as simple as any customer facing team. If you can get them working out of HubSpot, all their lives get easier, right? And customer facing sometimes includes that finance team. If they're sending invoices to people, we want their job to be easier if we can. So I think that's where I've seen the challenges is, like, not only do we not know what HubSpot can do in some cases, but we're not used to interacting with these other teams. So do you have any, experience you could share as far as engaging these new parts of the business?
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of a lot of the role at Arrows, and sort of where the content came from at Arrows was, historically, proactive post-sale teams onboarding customer success have not been in HubSpot, right? HubSpot has been primarily marketing and sort of sales focused. And then the question that we would always ask is, you move a deal to closed won in your sales pipeline, then what? Right? And often the answer was like, oh, we have a spreadsheet for that, or we move to, maybe it's a CS platform, but much more likely it's a project management tool, or we just go to email. Like maybe you're using
Right.
the sort of HubSpot sales and marketing tools for post-sale things, but they're not really not really any sort of robust, scalable way that actually gives you the benefit of having everything in HubSpot to the same degree.
Right.
So I
And
think that
I want to give some visual context here while you're touching on the topic. Right. So this is a process map, and I love your, like when you mentioned Service Hub and Service Hub tools being really reactive and help desk focused, right? And this shift from reactive to proactive is really the mindset that we need to accomplish on, like, after we get the money, basically. Because up here at the front end, this is where most people in HubSpot land are used to living, right? We have some lead management activity, some sales development, and then we come into deals, and this is all set up from a very proactive perspective.
Yep.
And then we get to closed one over here, and now we have these, like, literally these complex needs, right? Like, all this stuff is supposed to happen, and but where are the systems, right?
Right.
Created to support it. And it's really because, like, oh, we got the money. Now all of our work is based on them telling us, that we need to do something or that something is broken. And that's, right, I think, a symptom of maybe the tools that have been available, right? But now that we can bring a lot of this into HubSpot, if not all of it, you can take proactive approaches. It does start with doing the work to map it out, like this. But if you do that work and decide to be proactive, like, we don't have to wait for the customer to tell us whether their product that they bought from us is working or not. We should be the one saying, hey, we appreciate the money, but we also want to make sure that you got the results you were looking for out of this product, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's often where we sort of really zeroed in on, the sales handoff being the sort of the catalyst for moving to a more proactive motion, right? Like if you don't have a handoff, or if your handoff is deal moves to close one, we send an email that's like, hey, here's a knowledge base article. Good luck. We'll wait to hear from you in support. A lot of people just won't reach out to support.
Right.
Like they'll just go to a competitor, or they'll figure out they'll revert to the status quo. Like I think there's a lot of churn and a lot of ultimately lost revenue comes from people just reverting to the path of least resistance, which is probably the thing they were doing before, which was probably not a software product, or it was probably not a product in the same way that your solution is. And it's very easy for people to revert back to that sort of status quo. And so leaving it to the point where they reach out is, you're behind the eight ball on actually being able to, you probably have, you have to go reestablish a champion. You have to go figure out what's happened in this time between them buying the thing and then reaching out to you. Whereas if you can take that sales handoff and really turn it into not even the start of the journey, we sort of always say, like, you want to be introducing what's going to happen once they give you the money as early as possible, right? Like, the sooner you can set expectations about what actually goes into being successful with this product, the better. There's a lot of, I think we're going to see more of it, but there's already a fair amount of talk about sort of the challenge of acquiring churn, right? Which is, you sell a customer who, sure, they paid you money, but the chances of them being successful, their fit in your ICP, their specific needs that may not actually be met by the product today. Anytime that you are acquiring those types of customers, you're just making it harder in the next or the following stages of the journey. So really setting expectations about what happens post-sale as early as possible, and then building a handoff process that matches what those good fit customers are being told pre-sale, but also increases the likelihood that they reach the outcome that they want, right? Like, the best scenario is and you can of course have multiple post-sale processes, multiple, customer segmentation isn't just for marketing and sales, it also applies post-sale too. How do you create the best path for any given customer from where they are today, from that status quo that we just talked about, to the outcome that they want to reach. And ideally, you're doing that in as few different paths as possible. You may have very specific reasons why you need different paths, but everybody likes to think, and every customer likes to think, and it's always a little bit of a balance here, but everybody likes to think that they're special and unique and they have needs that nobody else has. And the reality is, if you want to scale and grow a business, like, it is very hard to support unique needs, right? Unless you are a true enterprise and you're actually billing on a proof of concept and all these things, the majority of businesses are going to need to build repeatability into the process. And that really all starts with that handoff of, okay, we were told this thing in sales, we sold this thing in sales. What does the path need to look like for you to be successful? And the more proactive, back to that sort of point, the more proactive you can be about surfacing that path and getting them on it, the easier time you're going to have, right? Like you hear it all the time. Oh, well, they bought the product and then they ghosted us. Well, they just didn't know what to do. So they went back to like, it wasn't clear what the thing that they should be doing was. So they did nothing.
Yeah. And there's like, this is helping me understand, like, it's been these 10 months of being on the outside, just learning why things are the way they are. And when you hear about implementations for stuff like ERPs, where they spend all this money, spend all this time, and then don't use it, like, it's not even that they've chosen it something else. It's just they go back to spreadsheets, they go back to a way that's working. And when you, like, this is one of those cases where no news is almost never good news. Right.
Yeah.
And what's really, like, much easier to accomplish than most people think is, like, this is what we're solving, with HubSpot, and why I position it as a customer communication platform for the business, right? It's not just for sales comms. It's not just for marketing, right? And because this is what life is like when you don't do this. You have a handoff, and then you have, like, this entire team, like, can't see, any of this data. So they ask the salesperson, right? Or they ask sometimes there's even a inside sales team that's just there answering questions, just because these teams can't access the data.
Right.
And going the other way, like, we come over here and there's renewal opportunity, upsell opportunities. We have these post-sales systems where sales and the people responsible for doing it can't see any of this stuff happening, right? And the fact is that we have the tool set available in HubSpot now to allow for a lot of this to come in. This doesn't mean we're asking HubSpot to be responsible, especially in the manufacturing space, for all of the non-customer data, non-customer processes. Like, there's production activities, there's inventory management. HubSpot's not ready for a lot of that, even if you could do it. But just like HubSpot is better at contact and customer relationship management, just because you can create products, and you could make inventory management data happen in HubSpot, but all those systems have spent their time focusing on, like, QR code scanning and, all this special stuff. There's still a place for those systems. So we're not asking anybody to give up their systems. I think the main point is that customer facing teams are almost always better served if they can work out of HubSpot versus any of the other systems that they're using.
Well, I think that what it comes down to ultimately, and I think that we are starting to see, I think Arrows is relatively early on this trend, and I think we're going to continue. I think we're going to see it become the norm for, not every system that you might integrate with is going to be an app partner and all these things, but I think we are certainly seeing with the extensibility functionality, which is already in, and I think there's more coming in HubSpot. We are seeing this movement to HubSpot being, even if it is not the place where you are running the process, it is the place where you can see the status, the state, the progress which a customer is moving through their journey, even if it just links to the other thing, right? You at least know okay, this customer entered this stage of their journey on this date with this context. They are somewhere in this other process, right? Because in most situations, each process or a number of processes are dependencies to the future process, right? And that's where sort of handoffs become so important. Understanding where in the journey, what context does the customer have in the journey is so important, because to your point about the sort of gap between the sales activities that are being conducted before sort of the initial sale, we're going to close this customer, close this account, and then the renewal, upsell, cross-sell opportunities. If you don't get this customer to implement, to see value, to reach, doesn't necessarily need to solve all of their problems, but if they can't see directionally we're going the right way, all of those things become exponentially harder, right? Like try getting a customer to go buy a new product if they haven't used the first product, or try to get them to renew for a thing that, you just sort of failed to implement the first time around, right? And I think that is where this big gap is if you're not proactive, you're just leaving all that stuff to chance, that you'll get there, or that not even that you'll get there, that the customer will get there by themselves, and you'll be able to see the financial sort of transactional benefit from it.
Right. And this is like customer success, like the true definition. Like anybody with that label, like your job is to make sure the customer is being successful, not when they have a problem, not when they reach out to you, but as soon as they become a customer, right?
Right.
And this is just what we're talking about here is just fixing and supporting the processes that aren't working very well. My favorite thing about HubSpot, and just a little bit of a shameless plug to kind of visualize what you're talking about understanding, where stuff is after I started doing business with you, right?
Yep.
Now, since it's in HubSpot, since we are just managing this data and it has a place, now the CMS layer can make everything easily visible for the customers. And now all these order status updates, any kind of things that we're used to doing through an Amazon portal, is actually not that hard to do once there's data in HubSpot, like related to that information. And that's where we're not saying that the data has to be generated in HubSpot, but now we can very easily connect systems from outside with the extensibility that you talked about and show like, this is the stage of the manufactured product. This is the stage of the paperwork. And this is really like any kind of deliverable that's expected.
Yep.
Like you can track this effectively, and it's really, the same granularity and same management principles that you apply to deal pipelines, you can apply to these other objects.
Yep.
Right. And if you do that, like all these notifications, like when we say Domino's Pizza Tracker, all it is a pipeline in HubSpot with stages. Right. And this powers, like, this is the superpower that people don't know about, especially when it comes to custom objects, where staging powers so much when it comes to workflow automation and notification automation, communication management, right? And at the same time, monitoring and measurement of your own processes, right?
That's a thing that I think is key to building a connected system in HubSpot is be very intentional about what are the different stages in the journey, and then how are you defining them in HubSpot, right? Like whether it's a custom object pipeline, whether it's a deal pipeline, whether it's a ticket pipeline, like whatever it is, once you have it in a pipeline, you immediately have the benefit of understanding the state or the progress of any particular object through that pipeline, reporting on that, to your point, triggering automation based on that, and critically knowing when things are not, you can establish a baseline, right? I think that is the thing that you said a couple of times, that, sales as a discipline is incredibly rigorous, well implemented, and because of that is repeatable, measurable, and predictable, right? Like, sure, there's like variability in there, but like if you go to any sales leader, they know what their forecast is, they know what their target number is, and they know where they are in relation to that number. You should be able to say in a perfect world, you should be able to say that about any part of the journey, any part of the process, because once you have a baseline, you can then iterate against the baseline and say, well, and that's sort of all the way back to this point about, you can acquire churn. Like if you start to notice in a pipeline that the customers who are off track, whatever that means for your business, all came from this one acquisition source, or they all have this one characteristic in common, they are missing a champion, or the champion is this role instead of that role, or whatever it might be, right? As soon as you can start to identify those things, you can go fix them earlier in the journey rather than just keeping, hammering on the same thing in the current stage of the journey, which is probably just you being reactive to the problem. Like
Right.
proactive to the problem usually means go earlier in the journey and address it, which could be all the way. And we, set of arrows, like retention starts on day 0, or retention starts on day 1. Maybe the ad that they first saw, or they first found out about your brand, told them something which just isn't the reality of interacting with the product.
Right.
You see it all the time. Set it up in 2 minutes. Have you ever used anything that you set up in 2 minutes?
Right.
And if that's the expectation, as soon as you miss that expectation, you're always on the back foot.
Yeah. That's why I like to think. I mean, I'm feeling more and more confident in suggesting like thinking of the customer experience as starting when the money is exchanged hands, I think is starting to be too late in a lot of cases.
Totally.
And if you instead just adjust it to whenever the first value exchange, happens, whether that's, they decide to give you their email address, then you've got to manage the entire experience. And if you're saying something over here that this team doesn't know about, even if like this could be things that the customer's been hearing throughout, and just any questions you need to ask them and they think you should know the information already, it just changes. It's not the experience that you should be hoping for. And we were talking, I didn't get to any workflows with the workflows guy. What am I doing here? So definitely have to have you back, but I think this is the important mindset shift that we need people to have. Like, all this stuff, the habits and the way you approach different pieces of the customer journey already exist.
Yes.
Like we're talking about in the front end. Now you can do all of it in the back end. And in some businesses, you're already doing this, like the stuff you're showing about production progress. Like your back end systems like ERPs are definitely tracking that stuff. They just don't do it with any relationship to the customer data, right? And that's the disconnect. And so I think this piece is super important, and it's a great foundation. I hope you'll join us again so that we can, build out some stuff in HubSpot.
Totally. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. HubSpot is the place where you can match up both what the customer expects to see in their journey and what your teams need. Because if you don't line those two things up, you're always playing catch up on, who has what information, who needs what, when do they need it, and ultimately, what is the thing that we should go do next to have an impact on this customer.
Exactly. You are in control of that, so it should not be reactive if it doesn't have to be. All right, man. Well, it's been great having you on. Appreciate you taking the time, and good luck with Connected GTM. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Alrighty.
Have a good one, everybody. Yep.